All right, everybody, we are going to get this party started in just a moment. I want to welcome you to the first ever Extreme Hangout Metaverse. We're so excited to host this event. It's a first time for Extreme Hangout to be held in a virtual space. It's also the first time that the Ellysium racing team has done this extensive of a virtual event. So welcome to the party. This is actually kind of like a live beta test, so I hope you bear with us. And we might have some tech troubles or stumbles, but we're going to make our way through and promise it's going to be a whole lot of fun action. So first of all, I want to give a big thanks to Piing and FreedomWorks, who are two of our partners for today's event. Piing is an online virtual racing game, which you are going to get to enjoy in just a little bit during one of our breaks. So you're going to want to make sure you have your smartphone handy. You're going to need it for both our Piing racing today and also our quiz later on in the event today. So keep your smartphone nearby. Second of all, FreedomWorks. We are here in Chichester, England. We've been at the Goodwood Festival of Speed for the past 4 days. And so we stayed here on location, and FreedomWorks was so gracious to offer up their space today for us to use as our Ellysium Racing HQ for this Extreme Hangout event. So thank goodness for their high-speed internet, their free drinks, and this wonderful office that I'm coming to you virtually from in our real-world location. So Piing and FreedomWorks, thank you so much. Extreme Hangout, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit established in 2021. They've held 21 events globally, including 3 at COP. They've had over 1,000 speakers from 140 countries, but this is their very first foray into the virtual world. So originally, when Ellis and I had the idea to host an event like this, we said, oh, we should do a TEDx. And TEDx said, you know what? We don't think the metaverse is a legitimate space to host an event. And so when we found Extreme Hangout and they were more than willing and very excited to host us, it was a match made in heaven. So we went for it and decided we would both take this step. As we say at Ellysium Racing, the rewards of being first far outweigh the risks. So once again, this is kind of like a live beta test. We are hoping that the internet gods are on our side and all the different platforms we're using to bring this event to you come together without flaw. And if they don't, we'll work our way through it in the meantime. So we believe that hosting an event in the metaverse like this gives the ultimate benefit, which is access. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter what time it is. It doesn't matter if you're wearing your pajamas or your pants. You can just click in and be a part of this amazing event. So welcome to everybody who's here. So as a reminder, keep your smartphone nearby. It's going to be really helpful. Just like a regular conference event in person, this space is meant to be a public event that is safe and fun for everybody. So you can communicate using the chat. Please be mindful of being polite and not being inappropriate. I think that we can all use our best judgment in being good humans today in the Ellysium Metaverse space. And know that, you know, Francesco is my AV guy and pretty much our digital bouncer, and he can bounce you right out of here if we feel like things aren't going appropriately. So you can post on socials, take a screenshot, take some video grabs. We'd love to see you support us on Ellysium Racing and also Extreme Hangout. And without further ado, we're going to get the party started. How are we looking here? All right, so if you're in the space, let's make sure you know how to use it. So if you want to get around, you're going to use your W, A, S, and D keys, and also your arrow keys can help you move around. And if you click on the little avatar in the lower right, you can change your avatar into anything you'd like. The other fun thing is that if you use your keyboard numbers 1 through 9, they'll help you dance and get some moves. So try it out for a minute. Let me see everybody's dance moves. What do we got? I see a monkey. Of course, I see Ellis in his unique renegade race suit there. What's that little skinny stick person? I like that. I don't think I've even seen that before. And then we do have a bouncer by the staircase. That's actually Renner's, our resident filmmaker. He's covering today with the FPV cinematic drone. So he'll be taking recordings of our event so that everybody at home can see it. All right, it looks like we have some more people joining, so we'll give it just a minute, and then I'm going to introduce a film by Let It Ripple. I used to use this in my classroom a lot when I was teaching middle school, and Let It Ripple is a nonprofit run by Tiffany Schlane, who is an award-winning filmmaker and artist. And she put this project together called A Declaration of Interdependence. And when I was planning for this event, I feel like this film, even though it's just a few minutes long, really exemplifies my favorite SDG, which is SDG number 17, Partnership for the Goals, and how it's going to take all of the goals and all of us together to really make a difference when it comes to sport, sustainability, and climate action. So I'm going to sign off here for just a moment, and Francesco is going to get that film up. And after that, I'll be back with our first session. In just a moment, we're going to get ready for our very first session, which is called Fighting Fear in the Age of Climate Anxiety. So, as Ellis would say, the worst thing to have on track is fear. And when you're afraid, you're going to find the wall almost immediately. And I think that, one thing that I feel as a mom and team manager and founder is that, we see so much fear happening, so much anxiety around what's happening in the world. And I think it's really easy for young people to be made to feel as though there is no solution, there's no point in trying, that it's just so overwhelming. So one of the things that's really important to me is helping people find ways to fight their fears and turn those fears into action. So as promised, this event is going to be engaging. It's going to be interactive. So for my first session, in just a moment, I'll introduce our participants, but we're going to need your help too. So every participant here can feel free to use the chat to participate in this activity and have your voice heard as well. And so let's get right to it. So our participants for this session are Sky Yang. I'm bringing him in right now. Isaiah Aguagu and Justine Abo. So you're going to see their faces pop up on the screen next to my digital whiteboard here. And we're going to use this digital whiteboard to build our solutions of how to fight fear in the age of climate anxiety. So, Sky, welcome. Good to see you. What's your take on fear in the age of climate anxiety?
Good to see you too, Michelle. Well, in terms of fear and climate anxiety, I think that there is, recently last summer I took a class on, UC bending the curve, which is, the famous bending the curve idea of, how like the carbon dioxide going up in the atmosphere and how, the Paris Accord, we need to keep the temperature of this climate change below, like, for example, 2 degrees Celsius. I think there's a lot of fear in terms of, what happens if the world suddenly, just the ice just melted in the North Pole or something like that, and sea level rises, or something happens that just destroys our planet, and there's no inhabitable land for any future inhabitants and our descendants. So I think there's a lot of fear in terms of that.
Absolutely. So we are first in this session going to spend a little bit of time focused on our fears, because if we don't get them out there and we don't name them, there's no way to talk about them. So the first step in this interactive session is that Sky and Isaiah and Justine and Aaron are all going to work together to name some of their fears. So I see some of you floating around already in our Miro board. This is like an interactive whiteboard space. And so there's different things you can do. If you see on the left, there's a little Post-it tag, which is above the square. You can add a sticky note, a Post-it, or you can just press the T for text, and you can start to add your fears right under the fear bucket there. And for those of you who are in our space as guests, Francesco is running the chat. And if he sees that you're adding a fear, he can go ahead and let me know, and I will add it to the list as well. So For instance, let's see, I'm going to add a green sticky note here. And Sky had said one of our fears is the ice caps melting. And another fear was that we won't reach our goal of 2 degrees Celsius in time. So either you all can add your own here, or I'm happy to type them in as well if you want to shout them out. Francesco has, running out of drinking water. I'm a fan of the sticky notes, you'll notice. Running out of drinking water. I'm going to stick this one on a sticky note as well. All right. Yep, we've got causing sea levels to rise. Michael Chodroff says it's going to get too hot for crops. I love watching all of the little arrows moving around the space as people are thinking and brainstorming. All right. I think this is Francesco's personal plastic in the ocean. I see climate inequity and the effects of climate change not being evenly distributed. Legitimate fear. That my favorite animal will go extinct. Yes, I'm plus 10ing that because I'm a big fan of the animals. Further loss of species is something else I'm seeing added. We're not short on fears, are we, people? Admitting it is the first step, we like to say. So deforestation. Any other guests have fears they want to add to this list? In the chat, we're seeing the dying coral because of rising sea temperatures. You all are doing great. Agriculture and food become increasingly unhealthy. I have to be very honest, we've been living in Europe for the past 4 years and we're going back to the United States. And one of my biggest concerns is food quality and food cost. Running out of fossil fuels or sustainable energy needed. Absolutely, because all of these new electrified appliances and ways of doing things are amazing. But if we don't have the energy to power them, we're going nowhere fast. I don't want to say that your fears are great, guys, but I applaud you for putting them out there. And I think we've got some really good things working here. So as we're adding our fears here for another minute or two, I'm going to go to Justine. Justine, it's great to see you and thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where your focus is when it comes to your fears about the future?
All right. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Justine. I work in Detroit, Michigan. I specifically work in the zero waste area. I love to help businesses and people think about the way that we use products and what happens to it at the end of its life. Like, does it end up in an ocean? Does it end up in a wetland? Are you recycling it? And all those types of things, and coming up with new ways for our products that we use to create a healthy environment. So that's a little bit of my background. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Isaiah, I just added your post-it for decline in economic climate. So as a racing driver yourself and a social scientist, tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about when it comes to fears about the future.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was useless using that the application. So you saved me there. But yeah, I'm Isaiah Gwagu, club racer, racing driver, social scientist. And yes, I think it's common for us to think of just environmental climate as an issue. But let's say we do find solutions towards that, but we don't have the right sort of mentality in distributing those solutions in a way that is equitable and that is, you know, progressive towards the wider social welfare, then that's a fear for me in terms of our macroeconomic climate and how we have the resources to solve these issues, but we are not collectively, for whatever reason it might be, acting upon it in a way that is, you know, that is demanded of our current climate, our current situation. So that's the way I approach it, and from the sort of sociological avenue. And yeah, that's my academic background, so I can't help but take that course of action. But I think that's a very prevalent issue that also needs addressing alongside the environmental sort of interpretation of climate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, that's a big part of what today's event is about, right? That all of you have different perspectives. You're from different backgrounds, different places, different areas of interest. And so bringing all of those together is hopefully what's going to get us through this session to hope and ultimately to action. So, Erin, thanks for joining us. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, how does it feel? I'm not that young anymore. I would say I'm your typical Gen Xer. I'm 45. But how does it feel to be a young person today? What are the messages that you feel you're receiving, either from social media or the news? What's the general vibe that you're getting?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for hosting. Really excited to be here and for the intro. I think that as like a young person who's working in not just the climate space, but then also the more like entrepreneurial, like enterprise avenue as well, the messaging is definitely like very mixed. Like when you go online, and I'd be curious to know how the other panelists feel as well. Like when you go online, there's this real sense of like doom and gloom and like, oh my gosh, like the world is ending, so I'm going to lay in bed all day because like that's the only way that I feel like I can control this. And so I think that even in this context with the framing of, climate anxiety, like I don't want to discount that like there are very real problems and like you probably should be a little anxious about the future, but instead of, taking that energy and then just being like, okay, there's nothing I can do, I think that there's a real power in like turning that narrative around. And being very intentional about, maybe previous generations messed it up, but maybe we can be part of the solution. And so I would say like I've been really impressed with like other Gen Zs that I've been working with, and like especially people who are younger than me. I'm 23, so I'm kind of like on that cusp. But I think like especially people who are younger and like Gen Alpha, like there is more of that like I still took typing classes when I was in, elementary, middle school, and like these Gen Alphas, they've just got their little tablets and then they're like writing treatises on like, climate change. And I really commend that. And I think that there's a future here where we can deal with the environmental aspects, kind of to Isaiah's point, and do it in a way where it's like integrating with our current economic systems, hopefully more equitably.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as I was saying before, I think it's just, such a core belief of mine and a mission, especially at Ellysium Racing, that, innovation and curiosity and problem solving, none of that is born out of fear. We talk a lot about critter state and smart state, and critter state is your kind of your reptilian brain, your fight or flight response, like, oh my gosh, the world is burning. And in today's environment, that's like, well, okay, I'll just doom scroll TikTok because I'm not sure what else to do. So we're hoping that we can use this session to give all of our attendees and viewers and our larger community the tools they need to, take those steps out of a fear mindset. So we've got a good amount of fears going here, whether it's plastic in the ocean, running out of water, running out of food, deforestation, our favorite animals, mine, which are like the alpaca or the sloth, going extinct. We don't want to see any of this happen. So the next step in our interactive session here is we're going to take these fears and turn them into hopes. So if you look at any of these Post-it notes with a fear, if you fear deforestation, what do you hope? If you fear a decline in an economic climate, what do you hope for the world, for yourself, for your generation and beyond? So I'm going to give us a little line in here to kind of break this up. And you can add some more Post-it notes, or you can drop things in the chat and I'll be happy to add them for you. And anybody who's here viewing, same, drop it in the chat. What do you hope? What do you hope for the future? And it doesn't have to be exactly tied to one of the Post-its that's already up here, but what's your hope? I'm going to put in that I hope that we work to protect natural habitats. If I could spell, it would be helpful. All right, we have Michael says he hopes that we have a movement for more energy efficient indoor hydroponic gardening. Incredibly specific, but wonderful. And actually, the great state of New Jersey is doing a wonderful job of this. I think there's a few companies right now that are focused on hydroponics and things happening. Oh, we got things coming in fast. I'm going to add them. Amber says protection and restoration of our wild places. Oh, I hope we work to protect natural habitats. So Amber and I on the same wavelength. Citizen assemblies. We're not going to judge typing or grammatics here. We're just trying to get things out on the page. Reduction of energy use and more sustainable energy sources. Better people making better decisions. This might be the biggest Post-it note I put up on the screen. Here at Ellysium Racing and Extreme Hangout, we are not taking political aim, but I think that leadership in all of its forms, in all of its places and spaces is so essential. And again, that's why Extreme Hangout and Ellysium are focused so much on younger voices and making sure that you all are heard and that you feel, that you are empowered to help solve these problems. Not better people making better decisions. Leadership. Yes, more citizen assemblies. I have from Amber, thank you, that we stop over consuming. Agreed. Reversing rising sea levels and restoring coastal life. Community in the way we empower education and trade. These are amazing. So many hopes. More hopes than fears, I think. All right. Let's give this another minute or two. If any of you have something you want to add, feel free to pop on the mic and share your thoughts and ideas around your hopes.
I just want to say, I think it's really interesting that our fears are like very tangible, like plastic and sea levels. And I think it's very telling that our hopes are very people centered. So I think that's
That
great.
is such a cool thing. Yeah, when I was writing down the fears, I thought the same. I'm like, okay, these are whats. There are lots of like whats. And you're right, very like food, plastic, oceans, ice caps, things. And you're right, all of the hopes have a lot to do with people, that's a really interesting insight. We have anything else from in our chat here? I'm going to add one more. I have a hope for new business models. I know that many of the people here today, both on our speaking presentation panels and in the audience, are involved in sports. And we have Isaiah, who's our social scientist, but also focused on the economics. And I think I think it's connected to this piece about better people making better decisions and decisions that are good for everyone. Which is not an easy thing to do, admittedly, but I think that there is a lot of innovation to be had in improving the business models. I think there's a lot of old ways of thinking, and a lot of that has to do with late stage capitalism, which this event is not entirely about, but I think that there is a lot of room for new and interesting models and ways of doing things that can benefit more people in more ways. All right, so we've got fears. We've got hopes. As I like to say, ideas are cheap. Execution is everything. So most of my young panelists here have been or are involved in the startup space in one way or another and are young entrepreneurs, so they know what it takes to get an executable idea off the ground. So we're going to move into action. So if you can take a fear and or a hope, turn it into an actionable idea for all of our guests and show them what that means. Bonus points if you can connect it to one of the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you wanted to act on one of these hopes, what could that look like? Maybe it's a business idea. Maybe it's a research project. Maybe it's an experiment. I don't know. How could you take action on any one of these things? And if your idea is too long to fit in a Post-it, you can very much hop on the mic and share your idea with us, and I'll do my best to encapsulate it. All right, see things coming in here. Anything that starts with small rockets, I'm down for. So let's see. This says small rockets for space exploration for further energy development. I love it. Michael says providing access and empowering young people through education. Absolutely. Core pillar here at Ellysium Racing, and I know shared mission at the Ripple Center. So education, how, where, when, how do we educate young people to even know what to do or how to do it? And how do we help them take action? Create a website that tracks how much drinking water we have left and what we are doing to increase or decrease it. Love it. Amber says volunteering. Absolutely. Offer your time, offer your energy, your expertise, your talent. This is a great way to take action. Education, obviously the goal of SDG number 4, and quality education, and again, making sure that it's accessible to all people in all places. Sustainable enterprises, I think, kind of falls under maybe goal number 9 or goal number 11.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of discuss a little bit more, like, I think that when we think about traditional capitalism, there is this sense of like, you know, forever growth, like the hockey stick. If you're in the startup space, like you know what that's like goal is to exit for 500 million, like 1 billion, whatever. And I think just like rethinking the ways that we think about like extraction and success and like sort of that, like what it means to build a sustainable enterprise, like not just sustainable in the sense of environmental, but also sustainable, like it will live without you. So I feel like it kind of fits under goal 8 as well, which is like decent work and economic growth.
Yeah, agreed that like more is not always more. There's this great guy named Faris Yakov, and he's super smart, and he does this great video piece. It's like such a weird lost internet thing. I'll have to find it and post it for everybody. But he does this thing about the singularity. Michael says, well said, Aaron, if you're not reading the chat. So bravo. I absolutely agree. And this idea of that's exactly what you're saying, like hockey puck, hockey stick growth, that it just can't go on and on and on. It doesn't work that way. So yes, more sustainable systems of all kinds. So we have some really great action going here. And this Miro board, when we're done with the event, all of the sessions activities will be on this board, and I'll actually be able to share it publicly with you all, so you can go back and check it out and take what you like from what we created together here today. So of my wonderful guests, Sky, Isaiah, Justine, Aaron, share with me some closing ideas or thoughts around what it feels like to take a fear, turn it into hope, and then take action on it. Justine, why don't you share with us?
Of course. So I guess if I were to name an overall theme and then name it under one word, the word would be understanding. I think people develop fears, especially about new things that we haven't really been taught about in schools and stuff, much like climate change, when we feel like we don't understand it as well. I think this ties to the 4th Sustainable Development Goal as well, which is quality education. So this might include like traditional education where we talk about climate change in school, or it might even include educating yourself and then educating the people around you, so there isn't really as much like climate doomism. Like if we look at one of our fears, mine I wrote is my favorite animal will go extinct. And if you think that that's going to be true, I guess my favorite animal is a penguin. So if I think that penguins are going to go extinct and I just have anxiety about it and stuff without maybe finding, like looking up the ways that like people are saving penguins and stuff, or like listening about it or telling my friends about it, you stay in this fear state without really understanding like all the work that is done by so many people around the world.
Absolutely. And I think that like this kind of idea around niche action, I think should really be supported, that if you're all in on penguins, then go help the penguins, right? Because if you're helping the penguins and Aaron's helping the sloths and I'm out there with the alpacas, like collectively the animal world is going to be okay. And then there's folks who are devoted to plastic and someone who's all about the coral, and then that's ocean stuff. Like, so, I think part of this thing about fear is everything immediately is overwhelming and you feel like you have to fix everything all at once. Whereas like if you focus on what you're passionate about and attack that little piece of your world, there are other people doing that and other people doing other things. And then, before you know it, we have our own hockey stick trajectory of actually being able to make an impact. So, perfect. Michael says, Justine, preach. So, excellent. Well, Isaiah, let's go to you. What kind of closing words do you have for our attendees and our guests today?
A positive one, really. I think the overarching theme towards action is community, and by extension, as much as I do from our motorsport endeavors, that partnerships are not as easy as it might look from the outside in to acquire. But further than that, like we've established unique avenues for ourselves. How do we use our resources and set a precedent of community, of partnerships, to impart what we've already achieved onto those who are trying the same thing or who might need the outlet in whatever sort of creative way we do it. Like if you take the work we do in STEM for young kids. I've seen you do it across the world. I do it in London for the guys the kids in the streets. Yeah, it's just the importance of community and partnerships that matter, not partnerships that just look good for whatever trend. I'm a granddad, so I don't know what goes on social media. I just know there's a whole lot of trends. Most of it don't make sense to me. But when it comes to partnerships, I think we need to see more partnerships that matter, that have a progressive effect on our socioeconomic welfare. And yeah, I think that's my closing takeaway from me. And I think a platform like this is optimism for everyone involved and locked in right now to achieve that growth that is healthy, not the sort of what did you call it, late capitalist growth that we've been sort of learning in schools, but growth that we can actually feel and see in our everyday sort of reality. So that's my closing statement from this.
Awesome. Much appreciated. And Sky, why don't you wrap us up with any last thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna share a really quick example that's not necessarily about sustainability, but was student body president for UC San Diego. I represented 32,000 people, and I, was co-chair for UC Council president. So I had to, advocate for, well, I wanted to advocate for, for example, student housing, which was the big part, especially within the UCs, that students don't have housing. So, you have this fear that, there's no housing, there's a problem, and you hope that, okay, what we're going to do? We can advocate, for example, to the Board of Regents, we can advocate to UC presidents, we can advocate to the chancellors, trying to expand housing to the state legislators. And that's what we did. We went to talk with the regents, we talked with the president of UCs, we talked with chancellors, legislators, and we were able to get more fundings to build more housing and get commitment, for example, from my campus chancellor for 2030 for 4-year housing guarantee. And right now we only have a 2-year, just restaying last year. So, it's a big step up. And I'm sharing this because, I think that if you have a dream, you have to chase it. And then, if you see something you like, something you want to pursue, you have to chase it. And, as a former Ripple Center alum, that, education, as Michael said, is very important aspect. Right now, I'm studying abroad in Cambridge right now, and actually, I'm taking material science as one of my classes. I don't know why would I do that, because I'm a political science major, but I'm really interested, in energy and different type of materials on, I guess, more sustainable development for the future. So I think having that education and be able to learn that and giving people opportunities to learn about sustainability, climate change, global warming, stuff like this will increase a lot of actions in the future.
Absolutely. So well said on behalf of all of my participants here today. Sky and Justine and Aaron, all part of the Ripple Center alum crew. Thank you so much. Isaiah is a personal friend and fellow racing driver, social scientist as well. So I think all of you, it's so obvious that there are diverse interests and backgrounds, and that all of them can come together to have this interesting conversation, do it in a unique way, and get to play online with some Post-it notes, which is one of my favorite things to do. So I really appreciate you all being here with us today and kicking off Extreme Hangout Metaverse with this first session, Fighting Fear in the Age of Climate Anxiety. I hope we left each of our attendees with a little less fear, a lot more hope, and some actionable ways that they can get to work in their communities and beyond. So thanks for joining us. Next up, we are going to do some digital racing. So all of you who are here in the session with me should pop off and pop into the metaverse space. We're going to be putting up a screen where you're going to need your smartphone to scan the QR code and join the game. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your participation, and we'll see you soon. Friends, fans, Ellysium and Extreme Hangout communities, welcome to our second session, The Game of Life, Learning How to Learn in a VUCA World. So I want to welcome my guests. I have Cade and Vic here from SectorX. And so we can start out, if you gentlemen want to share a little bit about what SectorX is, and then we'll hop into a pretty candid conversation about learning, education, and gaming in the 21st century. So take it away.
Oh, it sounds good. First, I'd like to say thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the previous guest. That was really good. That was a really good session. So I enjoyed listening to that. So SectorX is a virtual reality, augmented reality, and an esports gaming venue. So our first one is in Cherry Hill. We're looking to open up some more. So yeah, so we get to do some pretty cool things. We started out, we were the first ones in the US with free roam, which was 100% Wi-Fi. You didn't need to wear the backpacks on your backpack. We teamed up with a company, a content creator out of the UK, who's creating custom, proprietary stuff for us, so that we can bring to other people. We're also working with them on an environmental awareness, fully immersive program experience where people can interact with their environment as they go and try and do some of the things that our young adults talked about in our first session. So right now we've been strictly a retail, and we've done some educational processes and worked with some, with people in our community, because we do work with a lot of underserved communities. So we are moving more towards the education space because people are asking for it, because you have these kids, standard, we'll get into the, once we get into the questions, but we just realize that education is really the next thing for VR and AR. So,
yeah. I mean, with the technology itself, as you've seen it grow and how different generations have been interacting with like virtual reality, augmented reality, and the entire industry, so many people have been wondering, what is the next step? Because as fun as this is as just a gaming device, how do we use our devices to actually learn things? I mean, you look at computers themselves. Do we use them for one thing? No, we use it for everything. That's kind of where this technology is going to go.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think, Cade, that leads me right into this concept, right? So for those of you at home that don't know or who have never heard this term, VUCA is a term that's been coined to describe our world today, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so I think, to Cade's point, a lot of things that we use early stage technology for aren't what the real utility becomes, down the line when they kind of grow and evolve and mature a little bit. So maybe each of you could share, what's the most exciting things you're seeing going on today in the VR and AR space as it relates to education?
So I like to look at it as this could impact education. However, it is not a 100% education related technology. It's just how incredibly social XR and VR and everything could be. You can connect people from all over the world, and you can teach people from all over the world, from different environments, different abilities in different parts of the entire world, of just what is happening here. How can that teach somebody over here on this part of the world? You connect those people who have never would have had the chance to connect beforehand, and just tell so much about the world that could educate so many people.
And I see it the same way. It's just telling the story. I saw it through the retail side, and as soon as I saw what it did on the retail side, how people reacted once they were in that free roam environment, how they knew in specific, they were on a flat floor, but when you put a hole in front of them viscerally, they reacted to it. And you could see it was an intense emotion. They would jump over it, jump to the side. If they landed in it, they would scream as if they were falling, even though they knew it was flat. But I was just like, you could really do a lot of things. I started thinking you do a lot of things with this, because we have scent, heat and cool. So once you hit them with all the senses, it becomes very realistic. So I was like, we could really transport, like I thought about my mom, who barely knows how to use her touchtone phone. So I was like, I could take her to somewhere in Ireland, which is where she was born, and she was completely blown away. I didn't hit her with like the smells of Ireland or anything like that, but I was like, if I did that to the next step, I'd probably blow her mind and she'd have a heart attack. But I just saw that. I was like, wow, these kids are so engaged. It's so new. And then it's another one of those things. Once they figure it out, they get empowered and they want to do more. So I think it is the evolution of where education is going to go, because it gives one-on-one experiences. You can have a one-on-one experiences while you're with the group. but it goes to a whole nother level because you're immersed in it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's nice to hear you both talk about the social aspects of this and how it actually does create connection between maybe disparate communities or people. Because I think, as an educator and as a parent, I think, what we hear all the time is the isolation of technology and the isolation of these experiences and the disconnection from the real world. And I think exactly what you're saying is this technology actually has the opportunity to do entirely the opposite. And that's what people maybe are misunderstanding or, we need to unpack those stigmas for them. But I think all of the young people who are watching this today will say, oh, thank goodness, there are some adults who get it that, we've been gaming since we were 5 years old and we learn everything we need to know, behind the controller or in the headset. What are some of the skills or values or mindsets that are coming from the gaming world and these experiences that young people will need to take with them into the workforce?
So these are actually things that I learned myself just over time as both a developer and somebody who grew up gaming in recent years, is that there's a lot of things that you don't think about when you are playing video games. If you're playing something that is a competitive game, you are learning about the multitasking skills, the ability to communicate and perceive what your other teammates are doing. You're able to understand in a virtual world, which can also translate to the real world, of just everything that's happening around you. And it gives you an extra sense of focus that you're able to bring into the real world. A game that I used to love to play was a sport game that was in VR. And it was a very high-paced game where you'd have to make sure you're using your hands correctly. You had to make sure everything around you was 100% what it was supposed to be. And there were so many different aspects of things that you were paying attention to that you would be very immersed in making sure your focus was on everything around you. And I realized after I stopped playing that game that translated into the real world very well for me, because it made me super aware of my surroundings at any given moment. And I was able to grow my skills as somebody who was very into just understanding the world around me. And it taught me how to make sure I knew what was happening.
So I'm on the opposite end because I'm not from the younger generation.
Touche.
I was a pinball player, and my Pong came out when I was probably 15. So we're working back in the Atari 2600 era.
Hey, that just means we were OG at this, Vic. That's all it means, is that these young kids should respect where we came from. That
is correct. But
on the shoulders of giants, as they say.
You're right. But you know what? Hand-eye coordination obviously was a big thing. And, we were doing some drone stuff for a while. And the Air Force was very interested in young men and young ladies that had very good hand-eye coordination because of, the big drone. Think about how things are going to be done. I don't really want to talk about warfare and things of that nature. But one of my favorite movies is a movie called Ender's Game. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's one of my absolute favorites.
It's a personal love.
Yes, where basically they have this group of kids that knows they're born into that innate sense of what the gaming, the hand-eye, and and the amount of thought processes, and they understand it completely. And that's one thing when I started seeing my kids, which are now 30, playing Doom, and they had 4 screens up, and they were all turning. I was getting motion sick. I couldn't even handle just watching their 4 screens, and they just picked it up like it was oh, when you just I was literally, I'm getting nauseous. And they're playing it for hours and hours on end. And what you don't realize is their brains get to visualize and take in all this different data so quickly and be able to discern it and react to it, where the generations prior, like people like me, it would take me years to learn it, where they were innately born into it, playing it from a younger age, and they just learned and got better as they went. So I was so I'm a technology junkie. Just so you're aware, I own a smart technology company where we do stuff, and I always dug it. Doesn't mean I'm good at it, and I understand, and I don't understand everything, but I could see the uses, and I could see what this can do for people. Like Cade said, he was a self-learner, and you'll find out a lot of these kids are absolutely brilliant, but nobody talks to them to find out how brilliant they actually are. and they may be brilliant in the game and these other things. They just need to learn the other skills to be able to sell themselves,
Yeah.
you know, to the world for their value.
Yeah, Ellis says all the time, you know, I'm YouTube certified. Someone will say, well, how'd you learn how to
Yeah,
do that? I'm
right.
YouTube certified, you know, and we, I think as educators and adults and entrepreneurs and people in the workforce that are looking to hire and bring these young new talents in, we need to find a new context of respect and understanding of where their learning came from and how they learned, and see the value in those ways of learning, and what they bring to the table as far as, you know, being able to be resourceful or self-sufficient or identify, you know, great sources versus terrible ones, and put that, you know, right up there with a 2-year or 4-year or a technical degree. So, you know, school of life kind of learning, I think, has a real place.
Yes. So we had an actual, we received a grant from Camden County, which is one of the worst, I would say, for education in the district. And a big part of the program beyond gaming is the mentorship and talking about people skills, you know, how to win friends and influence people stuff. But I mean, that's the stuff that nobody tends to teach. You know, it's like they all teach the math and the science and the STEM and all this other stuff. And do a certain thing, it's innate to this generation, a lot of the STEM stuff, but they don't know, where do I go from just knowing it to be able to sell myself to, teach other people that I'm good at doing this and this is what I could do for you. And then and also the other side is letting them know that even though they're great, they need to understand what it's like to be humble and start at the bottom. And the coping skills, you know what I mean? That's the one thing I find, you know, as a hirer and someone, I always talk about who raised you. I say that all the time. It's like, I want to grab it. I was like, I want to grab your parents. They forgot to tell you a couple of really key things.
Yeah.
But that's where I really want to work on the other stuff because I already know they're good at the technology. Now it's a matter of how do we get that to a point where they can be successful in life.
Yeah. Like how to human 2.0.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I've kind of despised the term soft skills or 21st century skills. I mean, yes, it is social emotional learning. It's all of those things. And again, respecting the environments that these young people are growing up in, you know, physically, digitally, politically, economically, to understand the context that they're coming from. But then also, you know, helping them foster those things that maybe we learned in our generation. And I immediately feel like I start to sound like my parents when these things come out of my mouth. But this is just it, right? Like creating these kind of give and takes between the older generations and the younger ones, kind of, you know, the apprenticeship model, but making it go both ways.
Right. Well, here's the same issue we run into at education, and this is what I found. So when you have the people that are on the boards that are 45, 50 and older, and the teachers are older, you get a lot of pushback because people tend to want to do what they've always done as teachers. So when these new things come about, it's almost like you need, you know, we're going to need that new, I went through the same thing with the smart technology. You know, when you're trying to sell something to a 65-year-old person, well, they're the ones with the money that can buy it. That's right. You know what I mean? And but once they figure out what it's done and you can tell it to them, they're like, oh yeah, it makes my life convenient. It's not smart. It's just convenient.
Yeah.
But the same way with education, when you approach, you know, some of these boards, you know, same thing with esports 4 years ago. It's like, how can esports do anything? My kids are playing that stuff all the time. I don't want them doing it. But they're making the decisions. And that's the key point before en masse, you know, kind of hits in on a lot of these education things. So that's where we're at right now. We're hoping to start putting together these pilots that start proving, you know, these use cases that this really works. But then again, if it's one-on-one and the technology can teach the students, you can see why teachers might be a little bit upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, it goes back to my last session and talking about upending entire models and systems and not being afraid to do it and understanding that, yes, there will be collateral damage across, you know, multiple kind of verticals or aspects, but it's a necessary part of the process of reinventing what this looks like. So, I mean, Cade, what are you seeing as a younger person in the space? Like, what are the biggest barriers into making this mainstream so that in 5 or 10 years, it's like, oh yeah, of course, everybody's doing it. AR, VR education.
the biggest barrier is that fear, like you mentioned. It is, everybody is so afraid to take those next steps. One of the things that I think I like to say I specialize in is pushing the boundaries of what is and isn't social and connectivity technology in VR. A lot of people are afraid to build new systems in these like applications in these games that could in the long run, remove the friction of using this technology. But in the short run, it looks very difficult. There are so many things that VR developers want to do. Like, for example, if you played any VR games, you know that if you have a menu in front of you, you have a controller and then you use it like a remote and you click the menu or whatever. That's a very big friction point, because there's no point that you should have to have this extra piece from your hand going to this menu in front of you. You have hands. So you should be able to just use your hands. And there's so much of this technology is that it's just fear of building these new pieces of technology that will end up removing that friction. And over time, we are seeing that it's getting better and better. Apple released their headset, which removed a big friction point of just a cursor.
No
function.
No, this is not an official endorsement. No,
It's not. Trust me, it's not. But you'll have so many companies who decide, like, okay, we are going to try to push the idea of what we can do. And almost every time that a company has done it, it has shown to be a phenomenal extra step on top of what the technology is doing. I mean, like we're doing here with education too.
And stuff is happening exponentially quicker.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, the quality, like when I first saw VR, I wasn't too excited about it. It was very cartoony. You know, they didn't figure out the motion right, so people like me now get a little motion sick if there's too much, if the eyes don't match the brain. So they really figured out the whole eye-brain match thing. You know, I'm sure your son Ellis can tell you that some of the racing cars before 4 years ago that I got in with the VR, it was not real at all. And it would make you nauseous very quickly if you didn't have a fan blowing 100 miles an hour in your face. So to me, it's like, okay, they're starting to get the timing right. Like, but now they're starting to get the simulators right. And I'm sure Ellis is probably going to get on there and say, now it's getting very, very close to real racing. Yeah. So, you know, if you don't own $1 million car, you could put 100 hours in this thing. And if somebody put you in a car, you'd be pretty close. Yeah. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And that's where we're getting at this point. I know the brainchild here, he's moving, you know, he's already in the next level of thought process. I'm always about, I'm not quite Apple where they just throw it out there and it's like, tell me your mistakes and I'll fix it. Yeah. I like, you know, but I really see where it is going. Like I can enjoy VR right now. I don't have the motion sickness because they've kind of figured that part out. And now the realism is really where things come in, like pilot training. Right. That's another course we're going to offer eventually, because again, you don't own a plane, very expensive to put flight, on. But if you have a flight simulator that's very realistic and it pairs you up with a plane that looks almost exactly the same. Yep. I mean, you're going to do well because you went through the feeling and the visceral experience versus just staring at a book saying, yep, I hope that's how it's going to work out when I get in a real plane. Right. I think it brings back again these important themes of the democratization of the access to these types of experiences. And yes, VR headsets and the PCs required and all the technology is still costly in the big scheme of things for a lot of people, but we're seeing that cost, it's like if you think about transistors and computer chips from the 60s and 70s, the exponential expansion in the technology and the economics of scale that will bring the cost down mean that, you may never ever get to a racetrack or take to the skies, but you can absolutely, drive an F1 car at Spa in 1979, if you want to, and likewise, have a 5 cents experience of Ireland, even if you may never get to go there, either because of, constraints of time, energy, disability, whatever. So it's just expansion of access, which I think is really, really exciting and cool. So I do want to make sure if our audience members have questions that they're getting them in while we have time. So Francesco's on the chat here. If you have questions for Cade or Vic, please drop them in the chat and I will post them up here. But in the meantime, maybe you could each share with us, like, what's your hope for, we talked in the last session about fears and hopes and actions. So what's your hope for education and learning as we move into the future?
I'll take the first one. Yeah. My biggest hope is that it becomes just using technology for education becomes a wider thing. One of the things I struggled with back in high school was I suck at sitting in a class and just trying my best to focus. I'm just not very good at that. And one of the things that I found myself being able to do was to teach myself with technology. I originally didn't think that I would want to go into the software development space or try to figure out how to do this type of coding or this design philosophy. But that's just because for the longest time, I didn't know that was an avenue I thought I could go. And once I found that myself able to start learning these things and found that I really liked learning it myself, those are the avenues I started going in. So I guess one of the biggest hopes I would have is that in the long run, we start integrating more both immersive and regular technologies in the actual education process to not only help educate better, but also to show these students that there's more paths that they can go besides the basic prerequisites that they're used to going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So I'm a teacher. I've been teaching education for 20 years, and I can see when kids shut down. And and it used to be you get a 10-minute window, then it's 9, now it's down to 3, and now I tell them to pull out their phones and look stuff up. Yeah. Because their attention span. So a lot of what I see now and what's happening just with the youth is engagement. How do we, how do you engage these kids and to make them find anything exciting? So when I see this, I see a huge opportunity here for not only engagement. Well, I was always a big one of gamifying. When I see kids get bored, I'd have them stand up and we play a game on the board or just anything different to make them other than just sit down, because when you're sitting in a chair listening to an old person talk, minutes turn into hours by accident. You look at the clock, it's only a minute past. It's the second hand going in reverse, but you don't really retain. But when you put people in a position that they like something and you have them learn accidentally, which is what I did to my kids. Like I started my kids with the Jump Start and the Reader Rabbits and all those things, and they were well read by the time they got to school, because they didn't realize that I tricked them into learning, because they were stomping on ants while they were spelling words. To them it was fun, and I was like, and at 10 years old I said, "Gotcha, I made you learn," even though you had fun. But I'm a big fan of the gamified learning. But where I see this is, like, we're in Cherry Hill, which is probably one of the most highest paid demographics and wealth in the area. The 5 miles away is Camden, the ultra opposite. So the kids here have their own $3,000 and $4,000 computers, so they can do what they want. But then you go into these other places where they don't have the same gear. And what we're trying to do here at SectorX is we have that gear, and we're actually working with nonprofits to help bring these kids in here and give them the same tools. And
absolutely.
And with the VR learning, as far as the cost factor, that has definitely come down from owning the high-level PCs. So now you're going from learning from tapping to now everything's contained inside you, and you pick your direction. Yeah, that's the beauty of Class VR, because now when you gain analytics, you could see where kids go in the game. Like someone like Cade, he didn't know that what he was thinking could turn into a vocation for him. But now what we can do, we could actually see where the kids are looking, so we can gain analytics off of that, where they're clicking. Now we can find out this person is an analytical thinker, not saying they want to be an accountant or an engineer, but then you have the other people that head towards more the art side or whatnot. But now you start moving them or being able to ask them questions about, did you ever think about doing this? Because I don't think anybody really asks them without any reference or context.
Right.
So now I think, we're going to get to a point where now the data is going to start showing how we can actually help these kids and find out where they're not rounded properly, because that's the problem. They come in with a quarter round or maybe a half. It's like, how do we fill in the other gaps? Yeah. So that plus, obviously use case studies have already been done. Engagement, absolutely. It says, you only remember 10% of what you learned from reading, but 90% of what you learn through an experience. Like if you try and think about what you did when you were very young, you don't remember what you read, but you can remember a time that you spent with mom or dad, a good experience or a bad experience. Then you have retention. When you start experiencing things like holistically, it's the difference in reading how to hammer a nail in versus having a hammer in your hand.
Yeah, and someone could help. Yeah, you could read about it 100 times until you actually take the hammer to the nail. That transfer of learning is not going to happen. So
Well, you think
learning by doing.
Right. You think it's so obvious, but we
It's
continue that conventional path sometimes. So now we are trying to, move that along. So hopefully that answered the question without the roundabout.
Yeah. All right. We've got a few comments and questions from our community that I want to fit in before we go. So movement is key, which I 100% agree with. I was a Montessori teacher, so, we're going to get up and moving in a minute after this session is over. But I agree that just what you're saying, right? Learning by doing, being active, allowing students time and space to move around the classroom or whatever environment they're in, because sitting in a desk in front of a computer isn't always the best way to make anything stick. So let's see what we have here. If kids can get more focused, personalized designer ed tech, I feel like they will have even more time socializing in real life communities. What do you think?
I agree with that. And that's what I believe that the analytics is going to tell us. It's going to tell us where these kids already are thinking. So once we understand where they're thinking, not saying we're going to place them, but we can encourage them to go forward with that. Not saying they don't need the other things, but just being aware that that's where they want to go. Now they're designing it themselves. They're going to take themselves in those directions. And we're just going to make sure that we're aware of it.
Absolutely. And VR and AR give them these opportunities to try it out and try it on before they move into the real world. Even though VR, AR technology will likely have a place in their day-to-day work, it does give you this opportunity to try something on and see how you like it. What is it like to be a surgeon in the middle of an operating theater? What is it like to be a car mechanic, working on the torque map of an electric vehicle? And you can try that out through technology and VR and AR before you actually dive into it full force.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to wrap it up. So, Cade, can you share with us any last thoughts on your hopes, fears, thoughts, actions of what's so exciting about the space that you're in, and what do you hope for it?
I just hope that more and more people start to start investing themselves more into it and watch it grow. A lot of people think that this technology, either for gaming, for education, for workplace training, is just a gimmick. And there's so many people who could value so much from just looking into it and understanding it just a little bit more. Because once you look at it just a little bit, you start to see so many possibilities and opportunities. And it just paints a picture of a brighter future in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yes, en masse. That's always the toughest thing, especially, when you get into the capitalism side and, people are wanting to put that, finally invest in these things. So the more people that do start adopting it, obviously, the faster. So the people his age, I really don't want to wait until they're the investors. You know what I mean? Because it grows like their generation. Absolutely, VR will be probably one of the biggest things 10 years from now. But if we can get it here, in 3 to 5, and we can run our pilots and start proving case studies and taking it from all these communities that are underserved and prove a point and maybe get some direction and some funding. I think I think you'll see a quick growth. So so that's my hope that when we start running these things, that the case studies turn out the way that we envision, which I think they will based on the data we already have, and we create, more and better data to share and, to prove.
Absolutely. Well, Cade and Vic from SectorX, thank you so much. It was awesome to hear your complimentary perspectives on education and learning through VR and AR and what's happening in the technology space there. I know all of our viewers here, we're thankful to have you. And I hope we do it again soon. I know that the next time I am in New Jersey, Cherry Hill is definitely going to be a stop on my list. So I can't wait to come see you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
All
really
right.
appreciate it, Michelle.
All right. Thank you so much.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. So we are going to keep going. Actually, as the guys were saying, get up and get some movement. I think we need a break. So as this session came to an end, we're going to give you a chance to move around the space. So you need to check out our speaker wall and learn a little bit more about all the amazing presenters who are a part of this event today. You can see the sponsors and partners that Ellysium Racing and Extreme Hangout were working with to bring this event to you. And you're going to want to explore the space, because at the end of today, before we go to our rooftop dance party, we're going to have a little bit of a scavenger hunt quiz. So explore the spaces here. Make sure you stop by and see Ellis's electric Mini Cooper that's up on the second floor. Take a selfie of yourself and post it online. Visit our theater, visit our Carbify exhibit. So take a look around, and in about 10 minutes or so, I'll call everybody back when we are ready for our final session of the day. So thanks so much. Take a look around. I'll try to put some music on for everyone to enjoy, and we'll be in the chat and on the mic if you have any questions at all. If you have questions for Ellis that you want to know about motorsport or racing, and he's going to be in on our last session of the day where you'll get to see him live. So see you soon. Well, I think as Francesco loaded our screen in here, you can see me fixing my hair. So just wanted to make sure we're all set for our final session of today, which is titled Asking Great Questions, Telling Great Stories. We have had some amazing interactive and engaging experiences so far. We've had some digital racing, which went super well. And we're going to have a quiz game coming up, so everybody needs to stay tuned. But before that, I have two amazing EcoAthletes champions with me that I'm going to introduce on stage in just a moment. And we two are going to work through a very interactive experience that we're going to need some audience participation on. So I'm going to bring Ellis and Riley to the stage. It's very nice to have you. It's so much appreciated. I know I asked you both to hop in a little early. We were running ahead of schedule. I don't know where that ever happened, so I appreciate it. Riley, it's great to see you. Maybe you can just introduce yourself to our fans and friends here today at Extreme Hangout.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. I'm excited to be here. Hi, my name is Riley Barr. I'm an EcoAthlete, so I'm a former Division I runner for Florida State University, and I got involved with EcoAthletes at my time at Florida State. Now I'm actually working for a company called Blue Strike Environmental, and I do sustainability programming for sporting events. I mostly work with golf tournaments, so that is my niche. We do waste diversion and greenhouse gas emission calculations and reports for golf tournaments. So any questions around that, I'd be happy to cover topics on that, but I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Michelle and Ellis.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. All right, Ellis, we've been talking about you a lot all afternoon, and we've seen your little avatar doing its best dance moves throughout the space, but now we can see your real in-life face. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you who follow me, you know exactly what I do, which is drive electric race cars nice and fast. And obviously part of EcoAthletes, and super happy to get on, I think, one of the later sessions in the day for some awesome panels you guys have gotten to watch in our metaverse space. And yeah, I've been competing in electric motorsport we're on year 5 now. And we're, it's awful. I can't say what we're doing this year yet. It pains me, but it's super exciting. I'm sure you guys that are following along are going to enjoy it. And it's nice to hopefully get some new faces in here that maybe don't know about the Ellysium Racing crew.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ellis and I are playing that game of mute, unmute, because we're in the same room across the desk from each other, but I think we're making it work. So we are going today, Riley and Ellis and I and our wonderful audience are going to do this activity together. It's something I used in my classrooms for a long time. I'm going to say it's a little bit of a challenge, but I know that you all are going to be just great at it. So again, at our first session, we talked a lot about fear versus hopes and action, and the fact that, curiosity and innovation and, basically solving the world's biggest challenges does not It's not born out of fear. And asking great questions is often the initial kernel of coming to, maybe tomorrow's next best solution to some of the world's biggest challenges. So we are going to do this activity called question formulation technique. So QFT for short. I'm going to lay the ground rules out here, and we're going to go step by step. I'm going to participate as well, just to make it fair, because why should I just watch you all do the work? We're going to work together. And I'm going to ask that any and all of our community participants hop in as well. So remember, you can use the chat to add your input, and Francesca will share it with me, and I'll make sure it makes it onto our digital whiteboard here. So the purpose of question formulation technique and the rules of the game are, I'm going to present Riley, Ellis, and our community with what's called a question focus, which is going to be a topic that we're going to build around. Here are the rules of the game. You are to ask as many questions as humanly possible. Do not stop to judge, answer, or discuss any of your questions. This is typically the part where most young people get hung up. All my students would want to talk about what the question was or tell the answer to the question. No, just brain dump the questions. Also, write the questions exactly how they're stated, whether someone states it to you or it's coming out of your brain onto the page, because often there's lots of iterations on the same question. So write the question exactly as it comes to your mind. Even if it feels a little half-baked, we're going to work on improving them across this activity. And finally, if you have a statement, figure out how to turn it into a question, okay? So those are our rules. If you break the rules, I'll just remind you and revert us back to staying within them. We're going to spend, I would say, let's see how 5 minutes, 7 minutes goes maybe, of how many questions we can come up with. And so in just a moment, I'm going to reveal the question focus. I'll zoom in on it here on our Miro board so that everybody can get a better look. And then for Riley and Ellis, who are in the Miro board with me, you'll see that there is a text button, a T to the left in the tools, and also a sticky note button. The text button might be the best way to type our questions so that everyone can see them. And then I'll take the questions from the audience and see how fast I can type, not stopping for typos or grammatical errors either. Okay, so Ellis, Riley, thumbs up if you are game to play and understand the rules of QFT. All right, here we go. We're going to reveal our question focus in 3, 2, 1. All right, so your question focus is creating fan experiences of the future. So let's start cranking out some questions related to this topic. And if you are in the chat and have one, you put it there and I will copy and paste you into our interactive whiteboard here. So I've got, what do young fans want out of a sporting experience? I can see Ellis across the desk and he's thinking very, very hard. Oh, I see Riley has a text box getting started and Ellis is typing something. I can't quite see what it is yet. Ellis says, how can access increase for large-scale sporting events? Okay, what do young fans want? I have Francesco sitting next to me. What do you think, Francesco? Creating fan experiences of the future. Oh, what do we have for in the chat there? I think I see a chat. What kind of engagements? What kind of engagements wait, I lost it now. Sorry, hold on. What kind of engagements do fans enjoy most? Riley says, how can sports change fan habits? I like this. And how can fans become more educated at sporting events about their carbon impact? Let's see if I can, there. I think now we can fit. Oh yeah, look, we're fitting more on screen here. How can the stars of large sporting events be more accessible to their fans? This I like. How can star athletes be more accessible to fans? All right. How can every vendor at sporting events become more sustainable? Amazing. Gosh, reading these questions, I feel like I should have my Green Sports Alliance people here. This is their bucket. How can stadiums and arenas be redesigned?
Elevate the at-home experience without taking away from people going to watch it live.
Francesco's whispering in my ear, y'all, if you can't hear him. He says, how can you elevate at-home experiences without taking away the in real life event? Taking away from, again, no judgments on typos or grammatical errors here. Let's see. These are great questions so far, and we are playing by the rules as far as I can tell. How can sports change fans' habits? How can events stay sustainable with increasing fan travel? Yes, big one. Let's see. Oh, what's our last comment there? I see coming in on the chat. I'm not going to try to type and talk because it's not working. So hold on a minute. How can we? Can you copy paste something?
I can.
Oh, you can. Oh, hallelujah. Ellis is going to copy paste from the chat into our board here, which would be so helpful because my typing isn't going that well. Thank you, Ellis. See, you leave the technology to the kids. They've got it all figured out. Very good. Our community is really participating, which is very helpful. These are really good. All right, let's give this another minute or two. We've got some really good things going here. And I'm going to move some of these around a little bit to try to fit them in the screen better so that, because we're going to keep working with these same questions as we move on to the next step of this activity. So. All right. Riley looks like she's typing in one more. Ellis, if you have any last minute burning questions coming to your mind, add them, and then we're going to move on to the next step of QFT. Oh, Riley, you're back. You're back on stage. I don't know how you fell into the green room again. We could still see you typing and all of that, but you weren't up on screen, so you're back now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. This is my first time StreamYarding. I think we're doing okay, but all right. So we have got a lot of questions out of just a few people over the course of a few minutes. So again, the first step of QFT is brain dumping all of the questions you can come up with around our question focus, which was creating fan experiences of the future. So I'm going to reorganize my page here a little bit. So the next thing we want to think about is, with our questions, in considering these, are some of them too broad or too narrow? Are some of them too simple or too complex? And are they answerable questions? Sometimes in this activity, we come up with questions that are great questions, but it could take the history of time to come up with an answer, or honestly, they're just not answerable. So the goal right now, I'm going to mute my mic so that Ellis and Riley can have a chat, but talk about these questions. And the goal is going to be to identify 3 of your favorite questions. Which of these questions do you think are the 3 most powerful and that aren't too broad or too narrow, aren't too simple or complex, and are answerable questions? So I'm going to let you talk amongst yourselves. I'll turn my mic off for a minute so that I don't reverb with Ellis, but let's hear it. And maybe as you're doing that, once you come up with your 3 questions, I'll highlight them so we know we're going to move forward with them.
Awesome. I think number 1 on my list is increase access for large scale events. I think if there's any F1 fans in the chat, you will know that the ticket prices are not what they used to be. So I think both ease of access, whether it's infrastructure to get there without having to wait 2 hours, and also financial access to, be able to even afford a ticket. I think that is definitely number 1 on my list.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think I'm going to take... I really like the sustainable food choices. How can we offer more sustainable food choices? Because that's very encompassing. I'd be curious to dive into that one a little more.
Yeah, I think that sort of off the field, track, stadium side of, the experience can also be with, what kind of engagements the fans enjoy most. I really like that one of, we see some sports events where it's get to your seat, maybe get, a drink and a snack on the way, but that's it, versus some other ones that are really focused on the sort of outside experience. So I definitely think that is another solid one.
Awesome. And are those our 3? Are we choosing 3 top?
Well, we don't have to just choose these 3. Riley, since the Ellis, you have 2 of those. Riley, you give me one more, and then we'll talk about the quality of these questions and if we're going to take them to the end zone here.
Okay. I think I'm going to go with how can fans become more educated at sporting events about their carbon impacts?
Awesome. All right. So, listen, all of these are great questions. I would say that how can sports change fans' habits? Like, that's a kind of a broad one. And I think if we were to pursue it, we'd have to break it down. I don't know. These are really good questions. And I think most of them are not too broad or too simple and are not too simple or complex. Sorry, broad, narrow, simple, complex, and answerable. So Riley and Ellis have identified the following 4 questions. How can access increase for large-scale sporting events? How can we offer more sustainable food choices for events? What kind of engagements do fans enjoy most? And how can fans become educated at events about their carbon impact? So, how do you all feel about these questions? Do they feel broad, narrow, simple, complex, or answerable? How do they, you want to, does anybody want to change their answer, I guess is my question.
I think I'm not ready to change because I'm excited to explore the last one, but I do think that one's a little broad about becoming more educated of their carbon impacts. But I do have some specific ideas for that, so maybe we'll get there.
Yeah, awesome. We can definitely refine in the next step. So if you're feeling confident about it, then I think as athletes, you know how to go with your gut, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think I'm keeping on all of mine, so we're good.
All right, so we have now identified out of, I don't know, what are there, 15 questions at least here? We've identified 4 that Riley and Ellis feel are powerful questions that they'd like to pursue. So here is the final step of our activity. I can't figure out how to ungroup this situation of things I made here, so I'm just going to move them over and hopefully include them in the next step. Here's what I'm going to do. I promise for everybody I will move. Was increase access one of the questions? Okay, how do we increase access? Let me move our 4 questions over here. Then I will zoom in. Then we can get to work. All right, so let's zoom in a bit more. So our 4 questions are, how can we increase access to large-scale sporting events? How can we offer more sustainable food choices? What kinds of engagements do fans enjoy most? And how can fans become more educated at sporting events about their carbon impacts? So your final piece of this challenge, and I'd love to take the community's feedback as well, is to figure out, well, how would you explore this question? If you wanted to take this to the next step, would it be an experiment? Would it be a research project? Is there something you could create or do? And again, just like session 1, bonus points if you are connecting it to a sustainable development goal. So maybe let's go one by one, Riley and Ellis, and you all can talk about how you feel about these questions and how you might explore them. And I will be your scribe and kind of add Post-its and notes to our board here, okay? You guys take.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them almost can kind of be an experiment. You know, when you look at a lot of them are sort of, you would have to get input from the event goers. So when you look at sustainable food choices, you'd have to obviously experiment with different combinations. So you jump in from diet restrictions, all like that. You'd have to see what already, you know, takes place when someone's gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, all that. Fan engagement's easy. That's just pure statistics of having different engagements at different events and just taking in the numbers. So I think there's a lot of experiments that can be done for all of these.
I have to agree. I will say, I think the one that stood out to me was offering more sustainable food choices. I think would take research into like how, because that's something we do actually at my company, is like how far is the food traveling to get to the event, and how much carbon impact is, you know, red meat versus white meat versus vegetarian options. So just attributing the carbon factor emissions to each type of meal. And then, yeah, there would be a lot of research and some calculations with that one.
I definitely think that increasing access would be a lot of research as to why the barrier is so high. I mean, if you look at Formula One, I think they're kind of inefficient calendar is up there with why their cost is so high. So stuff like that, you need a lot more, behind the scenes work before you actually push something out. So I think that access for large scale sports events definitely is very heavy on the research side and jumping into, not just what the difference is between 10 years ago versus now when it comes to cost, but also why it's gone that way.
So you all have done a really great job. You've kind of focused on these, top two here, increasing access and also the more sustainable food choice. And it sounds like experiments and research would be the primary way of attacking that, at least at the start. I know that Riley said, this last question about fans being more educated at sporting events about their carbon impacts is an interesting one. So maybe the two of you could talk me through, what are your ideas? Like, what type of creation or activation could you envision at a sporting event that would help educate fans?
Honestly, I think obviously the easy one is any sort of, interactive, I think a lot of the times they'll even do them at some events now is usually it's to get your email, but you could probably get a better way of having an actual prize at the end of it. But any type of sort of small exhibit with a little quiz at the end is always super easy to give someone an incentive to read through. But it's also just showcasing sort of the more fun and eye-catching side of whatever industry you're in. So for us with race cars, it's the awesome cars out on track, but you could do whether it's a quick engineering challenge, a quick pit stop challenge, stuff like that, where it gets them hands-on and they get to sort of see what it's really like instead of just giving someone a pamphlet with a ton of statistics and numbers on it.
Absolutely. That gave me a couple ideas as well. I know there's a couple steps in the process of being a fan that you could educate them. The first one being buying their ticket. So if they were to fill in their zip code, I know this is a platform out there that does this, but when you're buying your ticket, you fill in where you're coming from, your zip code of purchasing. It calculates your carbon emissions right then and there at the end of it, and asks if you want to offset your carbon with, it's usually just a couple dollars. Well, depending on how far you're traveling, but it shows you the money you could offset your carbon emissions with. So I was thinking that could be a first step, and that's kind of more of the negative, showing how much you're impacting. But on site, it could show a positive of, if there's any local organizations that are being activated that are specific to that region. So if it's coastal or something, they could have activations there showing you, some positive things you can do in that area to improve or like decrease your carbon impacts.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think all of the sessions today, this theme keeps coming back to education, right? Like, how do we educate people in a meaningful way? How do we educate and engage people in new and exciting ways that you all, who are, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, it all comes naturally to you, and it's hands-on, and it's learning by doing, and it's collaborative, and it's not exclusionary. I think all of those things are coming into play, and it's just so obvious that it's the best way forward for us. So I think the most exciting part of watching you both work through this is the creation part, because yes, it always takes a lot of data and a lot of research, but the different creations that you can come up with out of these questions to educate your fans. One of my favorites is Envision Racing in Formula E, where they made a replica of a Formula E car out of all the technology trash, like the technology bits. I thought was one of the coolest, like, creative expressions of educating people around sustainability. So I love your ideas, and I would love to see them come to a track, an arena, or a sports event near you someday very soon. Do members of our viewing audience have questions, comments, concerns, things they want to ask of Ellis or Riley as EcoAthletes, or feedback they want to give on this QFT experience? Oh, the avatar game is leveling up in the audience here. As I'm looking over on the screen, every time I peek over, more and more people have taken the standard avatar out and put in something cool. So if anybody has a question for Ellis or Riley, we definitely have a few minutes to field it before we go to our quiz session that's going to test you all on some of the things that we learned here today. Riley, is there anything you want to share about what you're working on right now, or maybe what you're most excited about? What's happening for you?
Yeah, I can share. I actually just wrapped up a couple golf tournaments back to back. We had 4 in a row, so it's just the busy golf season right now. But I'm really excited to now get those metrics. So after following golf tournaments, we just track all the data from vendors that have traveled there, from the waste audits. So the amount of waste that's gone to recycling or reuse versus the landfill. So I wrap up with getting those reports and kind of giving them bite-sized pieces to understand. So, by saying we recycled this amount of tons or pounds, I translate that into something that can be really understandable to, this is the equivalent to driving a car for a year or driving 10 cars and this many gallons of gasoline. So I really like putting that into statistics that people can really understand and take away from it, their impact.
Have you seen all those memes online about how Americans love to measure things in this cow is worth 200 hamburgers, that we just have like hilarious ways of measuring things. But to your point, I think, it gives people a visual and kind of mental metric that's different than saying, oh, well, this is, what the heck is a kilometer anyway, as Ellis would say. Sometimes it's hard to visualize the reality of something. So any of those kind of visual references, I think, are really helpful and kind of bite-sized information pieces rather than, the 150-page post-event report, which exists and is necessary, but yeah.
Exactly. Yes, I love turning that into, we do have our long 100-page report, and then I like to give them the short one-pager that shows icons of, the equivalent of trees it saved, right? So things like that. Yeah. That's what I'm excited to get to our clients in the future.
We have a question. So I'll have each of you, I'll pitch it to Ellis first, and then Riley, you can take it. Do you feel like this next generation is more aware of sustainability, or is there still a lot of work to be done? So Ellis, and then you can tee it up to Riley.
I think definitely. I just don't think that it's presented in a way that lets us pay attention very well. So I think we're definitely aware of it, but it's just not presented in a way. It's presented in a still very old school way of statistic, numbers, graphs, that's it. Whereas, we're aware of what's happening and what's needed, but it just needs to be presented better for us to work with our brains.
I agree. I do think that our generation and this younger generation is very aware of climate change and climate action and kind of really seeing the effects on the earth today. But I do think what's lacking is maybe the consumption ideals that we still carry through generation to generation. So I think just education there and kind of some tools of where consumption and underconsumption can be applied would be really good.
Excellent. Well, again, just like our first session and our second session, bringing together young voices from different perspectives, both of you obviously from sport and amazing EcoAthletes champions. This is just one way that you support your community and the world by, sharing your perspective and helping people learn. Thank you for being good sports and playing along with QFT. I know it's not your normal panel discussion, but Ellis and I have made an agreement to do not normal panel discussions, that we've had enough of those. And anytime we can get people thinking and brainstorming together, even seeing your willingness to be able to just hop in to an activity like this and put yourselves out there, I think is a really important piece of the puzzle here. We've got another question. I work in the motorsport industry too. How do you see the adoption of more sustainable practices being more accepted or being made a priority? I guess we'll pitch this to Ellis as our electric racing driver.
I think it just comes down to it's got to be worth it. So, this is a sport that's run on money. And if it doesn't make sense for, on a smaller level of drivers and teams to make that switch. We're, already in a place where budgets are tight for even the biggest companies in the world. So if it's costing more resources than, they're getting the benefits of, then that's where I think it's tricky. But I think it needs to be done on a series level, that it's not an option if it gets to that point where, people in motorsport are probably the most stubborn people on the planet. So we're not going to change very quickly unless we're given a good kick in the backside to start doing it. So just has to be done on a super high level in the food chain of making it a necessity to go racing.
Riley, how are you seeing that in the golf world? What does it mean in your context?
I was going to add the same thing. I think it's kind of universal across large sports. It does come down to that hierarchy of money and the cost. And what I see, especially in the golf world, is just trying to convince sponsorship. So sponsorship around climate action. For example, we do like sorting teams for waste in the back of house. So behind closed doors, like behind events, we're sorting through all the trash. And there's brands that sponsor that. And if that can be also brought to the motorsport world, sponsoring compost bins, things like that, they can really anything, just making green, making climate action marketable for any sporting events.
Yeah, which I think lends to this idea, right? Like, so whether it's motorsport, you've got cars on track. I think there, when it comes to the climate conversation, it's more pronounced because they're race cars that traditionally were run by fossil fuels. But golf has similar challenges where they're saying, well, you've got these huge greens that consume all this water to keep it, up, keep it up and all of that. So, I think each sport has its kind of sore point that it has to address of why it matters and why it should stick around. But I think both of you are addressing that there's all these other aspects to sport that are related to fan engagement, whether it's the food that's served, how the trash is cleaned up, how the event itself is powered, how people are getting there, what the access of ticket cost is, and that doesn't matter what the sport is that the fan is in love with. I think that there's a lot of opportunity across the whole, the whole culture of professional sport and athletes like you that can help tell those stories. So I'm hugely thankful to have had both of you here today with me. And again, participating in question formulation technique, very successful. So thank you so much. We are going to move on to our quiz portion. So Ellis and Riley, you may want to pop yourselves over into the metaverse space so that you don't miss a thing. And I really appreciate your time today. And thanks for being our final session of the day.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you.
There's me fixing my hair again. See? Got to make sure I'm looking good on camera. Luckily, when you have an avatar, you don't have to worry about that. But I just found out as we were off camera for a moment that Ellysium Racing's own Renners was human. So he's the winner, and he should be, because no one spends more time with the trio of Ellis, Michelle, and Frank than Renners. He's our honorary Spezia family member and definitely Team Ellysium team member. He does so much of the editing and filmmaking that you see along with Frank. So couldn't do it without him. So it's no wonder he knows all the answers to all those questions faster than anybody else. So we're about to wrap it up here. There's one more film that I want to leave you with. It's one of my absolute favorite things of all time. The film I showed at the beginning, the Let It Ripple film, is about interdependence and the fact that we need to work together. This film is about the singularity and kind of where we all come from. So it's something that's meaningful to me. I just think it's beautifully made, and I think it speaks really well to what the mission is of Extreme Hangout, what the mission and values are of Ellysium Racing. And yeah, I am so excited that we were able to do this first ever event. I know it will not be the last, and I appreciate and respect everybody that came to join us today. So it won't be the last time, and we'll be sharing tons of content from this event with you across social channels. I hope you've taken a selfie while you're here as well to share. And thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Piing for giving us their awesome racing game. That was so much fun. Thank you to FreedomWorks for being our host and HQ for the day. great Wi-Fi, no lag. This has been incredible. It was my biggest fear for today, so I'm glad it went off without a hitch. And of course, all of our amazing presenters, whether it's our club racing friends, our Ripple Center fellows, our fellow EcoAthletes champions, or the guys over at SectorX doing incredible work in VR and AR. The future is bright and there's nothing to fear. We're going to innovate our way out of the world's greatest challenges, and the rewards of being first far outweigh the risks. So I'll leave you with this film. Enjoy it. And then we're going to play a little music and hang out and have a bit of a dance party. You can stay as long as you like, and you're welcome to come back. The metaverse, luckily, is open 24/7. Come back anytime. Bring your friends. Reach out to us if you want to host a party. We'll be happy to join you. Thank you all so much.